Welcome, everybody. John Arvosis here, the Arvosis Report. Welcome on TikTok. Welcome YouTube and Twitch and LinkedIn and Twitter. I need like the list in front of me. It's like Romper Room. If anybody remembers Romper Room, I see Jimmy. Anyway, hi, everybody. How you doing today? We are here to talk about Ukraine, as always, the latest in the war for the last 24 hours. Today's big story, we'll be talking about Kherson, the region in the south. Things are definitely heating up there. Also looks like some false flag action possibly going on from the Russians. As always, of course, my nose will be itching, because what would it be if my nose weren't itching? Thank you for the hat over there on TikTok already. You are lovely people. And of course, we'll save a little of our favorite topic for the very end, just as a test for the trolls. So anyway, yeah, people are starting to come in very quickly on TikTok. That's great. So just to remind folks how this works, I go for about 20 minutes, 20 minutes, actually not a ton of news today, briefing you on the latest news. And then we switch over to question and answer. We'll go till around 7 o'clock, actually exactly 7 o'clock. In other words, the next hour, we'll do questions until the very top of the hour. And on TikTok, you could submit your questions via the Q&A link that is in my profile. That's the easiest way to do it, because they're all stacked up there. On YouTube, etc., you can submit questions in the comment box. I am independent media. I am doing this full time, so I very much appreciate gifts if you can give them. On TikTok, that means all the fun little stuff you put on my head and everything. And on YouTube, it means the super chat. And as always, I will try to do a shout out for anybody who gives me either of those. And on TikTok, of course, on YouTube, excuse me, super chat questions will be the first questions that I will answer. Thank you, guys. Let me just dive right in. You know what? We've got a Discord as well, by the way, that I will jump on afterwards at 7 o'clock. We'll hang out on the Discord for a while. You can find all those links in my profile, or you can just go to aravosis.com and find the links. Thank you for the fun hat on TikTok. All right, let's dive right in. So the battle for Kherson is building, and the expectations are building. This is the next big battle we're looking at. I've got some information. Thank you for the hat there, baby shoe. Some information I'll give you in a little bit, but basically what I had said the other night is true. And I'm glad I've got sort of the experts backing me up on this. U.S. intelligence is saying that the Ukrainians have an opportunity for the next 6 weeks to make big advances in Kherson, which I'll show you on the map in a second, and also in Donbass in the east. And then once that happens, once 6 weeks happens, the ground starts to get really muddy because of the winter rains beginning. And that's going to pretty much shut things down because, you know, the men can't get through the mud, but the tanks and everything else really can't get through the mud. Now, what we're talking about, those two regions I was just mentioning, is the Donbass in the east, which is two provinces, really, Donetsk and Luhansk. Sorry, I know the sun is like blocking me there. Donetsk and Luhansk over here, and in Kherson here in the south. Now let's focus. My son's going to go down in a minute behind me. My son, the sun, I don't have a son, is going to go down in a minute behind me. So excuse that, it'll be gone. But Kherson is what we're going to be focusing on today, which is very interesting. Thank you for the owl there on TikTok. Kherson is one of the regions that the Russians annexed, so to speak, but we don't like to call it annexed because it's not really annexed. The Russians didn't annex. It was illegal what the Russians did, okay? Thank you for the hats on TikTok. But it is one of the 4 regions the Russians claim to have annexed, right? You've got Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhzhia, where the nuclear plant is, and Kherson, okay, over here. Kherson is getting very interesting because I will hold this close and you can look. You can see that river that cuts all the way through Ukraine. You guys too? This river cuts all the way through. Starts with Kyiv in the north, goes all the way down and exits here near the town of Kherson, okay? Well, what happens is, in the region of Kherson, and actually through most of Ukraine, most of the troops that the Russians have in Ukraine are east of that river, okay? Or, you know, east or south, but basically to the right side of that river if we're looking at it the way we would look at it. Russia has about 15 to 25,000 troops north and west of that river. And this is the only place they've got this is Kherson, in this whole region right here. Right above the river here, Russia's got about 15 to 25,000 troops. Everywhere else, the troops are south and east of the river. That puts the Russians in a, thank you for that, in a kind of a dangerous position because they've got the river to their back. And if they're getting surrounded by the Ukrainians and getting pushed back, well, they might want to evacuate across the bridge, but guess what? The Ukrainians have been blowing up the 4 bridges that cross that river so that they're seriously damaged. And one bridge, the Antonovsky, I believe it's called, bridge, which is right near the town of Kherson, almost by the bay there, right by the sea, I mean, is the Ukrainians blew up again today again. So what happens is the Russians are going to get pushed further and further back against that river. They're going to have to build pontoon bridges and things like that the Ukrainians will then be able to blow up again. We're going to get to the dam. Don't you worry. That's coming up. They're going to push back against that river, and the Russians are going to be in real trouble. Well, a big battle is brewing now for Kherson, for that area right north and west of the river. Now, you might think that's only one portion, right? I mean, if you look here, the whole Kherson province is like all of this. We're talking about one small area up here. Well, that area is really important because the capital, the town of Kherson, is up here. It is the largest city that Russia controls in Ukraine. 280,000 people, I believe, is the population. It is also the only regional capital that Russia controls for this Kherson Oblast. And it's super important because it is the only place, as I just said, that Russia has that is north or west of this main river. Now, why does that matter? Because if Russia can keep its troops here, look what else is nearby if you go along the land, the town of Odessa. The city of Odessa is a very important Ukrainian city. I suspect probably most of you have heard about it. And it is the one big port, really the biggest port that the Ukrainians have, thank you for that on TikTok, have along the river here, along the sea here. And it's super important. This is the area where the Ukrainians are now shipping out their grain. If the Ukrainians lose access to this, they then become a landlocked country and no longer have access to the Mediterranean. Big deal. I mean, big deal there. So the Russians don't want to lose this area. It is strategically important to the Russians, but it's also strategically important to the Ukrainians as well. Now, Institute for the Study of War, which is a think tank I like to mention to you guys a lot. They're very good, ISW, defense think tank. They say that the Russians are basically setting the informational conditions to evacuate. Now, what they mean by that is they're preparing the Russian people for the fact that Russia's going to lose that town, that Russia's going to lose the town of Kherson, or at least there's a very good chance in the next 6 weeks that Russia does. And as I said, this would be huge because it would help the Ukrainians defend Odessa against a possible future Russian attack. And it just sets the Ukrainians up nicely for then moving further south and starting to take the Russians on maybe during the winter, but probably after the winter, okay? The reasons we believe the Russians sort of already realize they're losing in that area, thank you for the hat there, Megs, is the general in charge of the whole invasion of Ukraine, the Russian general, said the other day, and I mentioned this yesterday, that the Russians have some difficult decisions before them. And that they've got to, in terms of Kherson, in terms of the region. Everybody reasonably interpreted that as meaning the general was saying, look, we're not doing so well in that region there, and basically trying to telegraph to the Russian people that, guys, you know, we're probably going to have to pull out. Now, the big part of the reason he did this is people were getting really ticked off at the military for constantly putting out Putin's rah-rah message of, oh, everything's going great. And then they lose a bunch of towns, right? Everything's going great. And then the Ukrainians start routing the Russians in the east. And the Russian people were getting annoyed. And a lot of other people were frankly getting annoyed. I love this. I am Black African woman. Liars. I am a Black African woman. Sorry, there was a Russian troll pretending they were a Black African woman. It's like, sure you are, Mary. In any case, so they're trying to let the Russian people know that there's going to be an evacuation so that they don't get, frankly, pissed off at them. Actually, that person should have been banned. They should, moderator, just so you know for the future, somebody like that needs to be blocked. I don't want them coming back. I don't mean to knock you, but I saw that you muted them. That person's not a mute. That person's a ban. Anybody like that who's obviously a troll, block them, please. Unless I've got to change the settings. I don't know whether I let you guys block. Hopefully I do. Let me know if I stop you guys from actually blocking. So the other one is that the administrator for Kherson, who's the head of the occupation, okay, basically occupation meaning literally to occupy, okay? You've got these parts of Ukraine. This is all Ukraine. So is Crimea on the bottom. And the Russians are occupying it, right? They're illegally occupying it. And they've set up governments to basically take over the administration, illegal governments, occupation governments. Well, the head of the occupation government in Kherson, in that region, said that they're evacuating a large number of the population to the east side of the river, including a lot of civilians, city administrators, and collaborators. Now, why is he doing this? Part of it is a public relations ploy because they're trying to convince the citizens, oh, the Ukrainians are coming and they're going to just bomb the hell out of the cities. They don't care about civilians. Not true. The Ukrainians do care about civilians. It's the Russians who don't care about civilians. But nonetheless, thank you for the hat there. Nonetheless, they're trying to create that impression. They are legitimately worried about collaborators, about the people working for the Russians, about the actual Russian appointees getting killed or arrested by the Ukrainians when they come. So that's where they're evacuating as well. Now, the big sub story here in talking about this battle for Kherson that's coming up is this issue with the dam. Okay, there is a dam there, a hydroelectric power station based on a dam. The name is the Kakhovka Hydroelectric Power Plant. Okay. It is along that whole huge, thank you for the origami there, along the whole huge river I was showing you. It's basically here at the bend in the river, more or less. The boxing gloves, thank you there. I appreciate that. It's basically here at the bend in the river, and the stew. It's here at the bend in the river. And there is real concern. It's funny. I saw this story earlier today. And initially, I wasn't going to do anything with it because it was things like the New York Post and other kind of tabloid publications. Thank you, Frist, over there. Tabloid publications who were talking about the dam and how, oh, the Russians may be preparing to blow up the dam. And, you know, the New York Post isn't exactly the publication that I trust on these things. Thank you, Jesse. But I was reading into it, and Institute for the Study of War, the really big, really well-respected defense think tank here in Washington, D.C., that folks around the world look to, they're worried about it too. And if they're worried about it, I'm worried about it. So let me sort of give you the background here, okay? Zelensky said in his radio address tonight, every night President Zelensky gets on and does a sort of TV radio address, and said that he's received information that the Russians have placed mines, M-I-N-E-S, not mimes, mines around the hydroelectric plant. Now, this comes on the heels of Institute for the Study of War saying that Russian forces are setting the information conditions to conduct a false flag attack, thank you for that, on the Kakhovka Dam. A false flag attack. I've talked about false flags before. False flags are, well, it's funny actually. Alex Jones, who a lot of you are probably familiar with. Alex Jones used to like to talk about false flags from the government. One of the reasons Alex Jones got in trouble, he was that guy that just got hit with a $1 billion with a B dollar judgment because he was denying the reality of the Sandy Hook gun massacre that we had at this grade school in Sandy Hook, Connecticut, where something like 19, give or take one or two, 19 5- and 6-year-olds were shot to death here in the States several years back. Well, Jones claimed it was a false flag, that it wasn't a real attack. It was actually like, I think he said it was an attack by the US government, and they wanted to make it look like it was gun owners who did it. So a false flag is a fake attack you do, or it could be a real attack, but you do it in order to blame somebody else for it, okay? So what the Russians are doing here is they are blaming the Ukrainians for allegedly preparing to blow up this dam. In other words, the Russians are planning to blow up the dam. Really scary. ISW says, the Russian military may believe that breaching the dam could cover their retreat from the right bank of the Dnipro River. In other words, the north and west side of the river I was telling you about with the 15 to 25,000 Russian troops. It could cover their retreat and prevent or delay Ukrainian advances across the river. So the idea is the Russians cross the river and start to go. The Ukrainians will now pull their artillery and other things up to the edge of the river, and they will start to bombard the Russians. Well, at this point, the Russians blow up the dam. And again, the dam is right here. So the Russians blow up the dam right here. I'll hold it up. And this whole area floods, which floods out any Ukrainians that are along the river trying to attack the Russians. And it gives the Russians a chance to get away because this whole area becomes flooded now. I looked at a map today that I think some Ukrainians had released. It's pretty bad. I mean, it's pretty bad the amount of flooding that there's going to be if this thing happens. Now, here's what we've got. So the general in charge of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, thank you, Chaz, for that, claimed on October 18th, so it was 2 days ago, that he had received information that Kyiv, the Ukrainians, intended to strike the dam, which he alleged would cause destructive flooding. So first you've got the Russian general in charge of the whole war says, oh, the Ukrainians are planning to blow up their own dam, right? That's the first thing. Then the head of the administration, so the Russian appointed head of the region, echoed this claim and warned that Ukrainian forces intended to strike the dam upstream of Kherson city. Institute for Study of War says Russian authorities likely intend these warnings about a purported Ukrainian strike on the dam to set information conditions for Russian forces to damage. Setting information conditions means basically doing a marketing campaign is what I'll call it. So doing a marketing campaign to get people ready for what you're about to do. Now, the idea here is the Russians keep saying, oh my God, the Ukrainians, they're about to blow up that dam. And they keep telling their people this, right? They're going to blow up the dam. And then the dam blows up. And the Russian people go, oh my God, the Russians, and not just the Russian people, Africans, Middle Easterns, people in the Middle East, Middle Easterners, Latin Americans, all the sort of audiences that Russia is trying to woo here outside of Europe and Asia. They want to be able to say to them, we told you that dam was going to blow up and look what the Ukrainians did, just to give them some credibility in their false flag, in their false claims, right? Let me just see here real quick. Yeah, and the Kremlin could, thank you for the origami there. The Kremlin could attempt to leverage such a false flag attack to overshadow the news of a third humiliating retreat for Russian forces. In other words, the final reason they would do it to basically defend their troops as their troops are fleeing south, right, to form a big flood. It's literally biblical to form a big flood. It's actually Lord of the Rings, a big flood that the Ukrainians couldn't pass. But it's also to divert attention because the Russian people are going to be so freaked out when the Russians lose the town of Kherson, because this is going to be yet another big loss for the Russians, that they want to blow up the dam and basically have that become the story. So there you go. There was a report today. I'm not sure if it's true or not, but actually, I'll tell you really quick. I keep forgetting to do this. On TikTok, if you would, please do follow me. I always forget to ask. YouTube and everywhere else as well. I am doing this as independent media. I'm doing this full time, and I am surviving with your donations and your contributions, believe it or not. So I appreciate the gifts you guys can give. Please, if you can, I really appreciate it. Now, one of the other stories that's out there, Russia may be leaving the town of Enerhodar. This is one of those ones that's hard to say in English. Enerhodar, where the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant is. This is the nuclear plant that the Russians have been occupying for a while now. Thank you for the hat. The Russians have been occupying for a while now. Thank you for that hat too, Frank. The Enerhodar nuclear plant is the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant. It is right up. I'll see if I can even get close to show you. It is right up at the tip of the river going up here, okay? It's putting the hat on TikTok. Right at the tip of the river here is where the nuclear plant is and where the town is, okay? This area is still, south of the river, is still occupied by the Russians. North of the river, up here, is free Ukraine. So right across the river is free Ukraine. Right south of the river is the Russians. Thank you for that. There are reports that the Russians may be leaving the town of Enerhodar. They may be fleeing. The New York Times says that Russian forces have started to leave a city next to the occupied Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant, according to a senior Ukrainian official and a report shared by Ukraine's state nuclear energy company, Energoatom, amid conflicting accounts of the status of a key stronghold. Energoatom, which is the, as I said, Ukrainian nuclear energy company. Thank you, it's me for that. Energoatom says that Russian forces had looted property before their departure. What a surprise, right? Is anybody surprised about that? Before their departure, taking furniture, refrigerators, televisions, and other household items. The exiled mayor, because this town is occupied by the Russians, so the legitimate mayor who's working in exile, of course, because if he were there, the Russians would kill him. The exiled mayor says that he doubts the Russians would actually be leaving because the Russians, as you know, thank you, Chaz, the Russians have been bombing this nuclear plant. This is the nuclear plant where there's been the ongoing concerns about basically having a nuclear meltdown because the Russians keep bombing it. Okay. Now, what the mayor is saying, the legitimate mayor, but he's in exile, is saying that he can't believe that the Russians would actually abandon the plant because it's too important of a blackmail feature for them. Having said that, keep an eye on this. It may be true that the Russians are just moving around. Thank you for that on TikTok. It may just be, they're just shifting the troops. They're bringing some out and bringing some in. But it would be a big deal if the Russians were now starting to lose some of their territory on the south side of the river as well. That would be huge. Thank you, Drew. Appreciate that. Let me move to the next page. What else we got? That one I already told you about. This was a really bizarre story. Listen to this. So President Zelensky, president of Ukraine, does an interview with the Canadian TV network, I guess, CTV, news outlet, and basically denies that Ukraine attacked the Kerch Bridge. Now, you'll recall the Kerch Bridge is that bridge that was attacked a couple weeks ago. The Russians got really pissed. Putin, has been launching all of these attacks on Ukrainian infrastructure in response. The Kerch Bridge is all the way down here. This is Crimea, which is the Ukrainian territory the Russians stole in 2014. Even though this is blue, this is water down here. This is water here, but over here actually is Russia. So you come here to I guess that's the town of Kerch, this little, I don't know if it's an isthmus or what it is. There's a little bit of a break. I don't know if it's 6 or 9 miles, something like that. And then you've got Russian land right here. Well, Putin, in order to connect the two, because he stole this area from Ukraine, in order to connect them, he built a bridge in 2018. And like I said, it's like 6 miles long or even longer. It's a long bridge. This bridge is the bridge that somebody attacked a few weeks ago. Now, Zelensky, these are the two quotes from Zelensky today. Ukraine didn't order the Crimean bridge attack. And then he went on to say, we definitely did not order that as far as I know. Now, that one made me laugh, I have to say. 12 miles, even longer. I knew it was long. Thank you. So the bridge is 12 miles long. Like it's that long of a bridge, right? So as I said, I have to laugh a little bit at Zelensky saying, we didn't attack the bridge as far as I know. Now, I will say this about the as far as I know. If Zelensky's telling the truth, it made me think of that attack on the woman in Moscow, Daria, what was it, Dugina, or Dugina, I think is her last name, who was the daughter of the far right lunatic, right? And the thoughts are that maybe they were going after the father. He ended up not driving the car with her. Car bomb blew up and killed her. What is interesting about this is that the U.S. finally came out maybe 2 weeks ago and went public and said, yeah, the Ukrainians did it. The Ukrainians blew her up. The story I read, Dugina, thank you. The story I read said that it wasn't clear if Zelensky knew that that somebody in the Ukrainian government was going to kill her, was going to do the car bomb. It made me think that the reason, because I was asking myself at the time, I was like, why would the U.S. go public? We're allies of Ukraine here. Why would we go public and blame Ukraine for setting a car bomb in Moscow that killed this woman? There's no rational reason we would do that. They're our ally. We wouldn't want to, get Ukraine in trouble. The only reason I could see doing that is because we were trying to send a message that this better not happen again. And that message could be sent to Zelensky privately if it were Zelensky who did it. But if it were some other element in the government that he doesn't have control over, the US might have wanted to do it publicly to send them a message, but also I think to send Zelensky the message that you need to get that other group under control. Now, I'm not saying that other group did the bridge, but the fact that Zelensky said, as far as I know, it seems like such a strange thing for a president. I mean, the US government isn't going to say, well, the United States government, Biden is not going to say the United States government didn't blow up those pipelines in Europe, as far as I know. I mean, you're not going to say it unless you think maybe there's a shadow group or something that could do it. I think it's more than plausible deniability. I think Zelensky is trying to say, there's always a small chance that there's something else going on. Now, final point I'll mention on this is that first weekend. This happened on local time. I think it was like 6:30 in the morning, something like that, Ukraine time. America time, it was 12 o'clock, 12:30 at night. Cause I remember I was just getting into bed looking at my phone and I was like, and the whole weekend, there were a lot of reports from national security. Oh, there's a super chat. I missed it. Sorry. There were a lot of reports from national security types for Ukraine, but also from Russia that were saying that they thought it might have been the Russian Ministry of Defense that did it, and that they did it to basically embarrass the state security services. Now, the thought here was that, and it's true, the Russian Ministry of Defense was getting a lot of stuff thrown at it. I mean, they were getting just eviscerated for losing. I mean, right, for the Ukrainians. Remember when the Ukrainians were just sweeping through in the east and getting all these towns? All the Russian talk shows on TV, the military bloggers, all the people with influence with the public communications were just eviscerating the Minister of Defense and the Ministry of Defense, right? So the thought is that the bridge was under the control of the security services, that they were the ones that were supposed to protect the bridge because they knew that the Ukrainians would love to take out this bridge. It's Putin's baby, right? Thank you for the hat there, Alex. And the thought was that it's possible the Russian Ministry of Defense took out the bridge, attacked it because they were trying to embarrass the security services. It was the Russian Ministries of Defense's own false flag that they made to look like the Ukrainians did it in order to embarrass the security services. Now, I mean, I don't know. I just don't know. But I think it's interesting that Zelensky is denying it, because up till now, generally speaking, the Ukrainians don't deny anything. They just simply go, gosh, that's really strange. They just sort of shut up about it to leave some confusion there. Now, finally, it's also entirely possible that the Ukrainians are doing it just to, that Zelensky's doing it just to mess with Putin, because he knows Putin's paranoid and he knows there's some concern there, like a Putin, of maybe elements of the government and what they're doing, so that Zelensky says, we didn't do it. And now Putin's starting to go, wait a minute, is it really possible that the Ukrainians didn't and my own government did this and I don't even know? So this could be Zelensky's A game in terms of that. Now, Roshin, I am seeing absolutely no super chat questions. Okay. Oh, from Drew. Thank you. Oh, sorry, Drew. I was wondering. I'm looking and not seeing. So Drew asked, forgot to ask my question. Two-part question. You're like a journalist. What implications does the dam being blown up have for the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant? Not clear. Well, it's hard to say. Here's the thing, okay? The dam, we were talking earlier about there being growing concern that the Russians may decide to blow up a dam, a Ukrainian dam, in order to flood the area and cover the retreat of the Russian troops that are heading south. In other words, the Russian troops flee south, they blow the dam, it floods the area, and the Ukrainians can't follow them. Now, just to sort of, I'll get close again so you guys can see, okay? The dam is more or less around here, like where the river crooks. So right at the middle of my nail here, okay, is where the dam is. You get up, the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant is up here at this curve. So right across the river from Nikopol, okay? So go south and a little bit east. So the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant is up here. The dam is down here. The river is flowing south into the bay here. So I don't know to what degree, if the dam blows here, all of this floods, but does it really affect the river up here? I suppose it's possible that the river up there is going to be higher, right? But I don't know to what degree that affects the nuclear plant overall. I like using my map, Isabella. Be nice. I love my little t-shirt map. I use it on purpose. I love that map. Second question, does Zaporizhzhia have a backup water reservoir for cooling? Wow. I don't know. I have not seen anybody discussing that. Usually the discussion on Zaporizhzhia is the backup for the energy, because the Russians have been they've been attacking the plant or attacking the area of the plant and not caring that they keep hitting the plant. And they've been taking out the electricity for the plant. And it's funny because to some degree, it seems like kind of a goofy thing to me that shouldn't a nuclear plant have its own electricity? You know what I mean? Like why it has outside electricity. Nonetheless, there's electricity that goes, although maybe it's the wires from the plant to them, but either way, there is electricity that the plant needs in order to run its cooling system. Nuclear plants, fuel rods, circulating water to keep the rods cool. If the rods get too hot, it melts down, nuclear disaster, right? Like Fukushima, Chernobyl, etc. So there's been a lot of talk about the backup systems for the electricity and how they've got like 20, I believe it is 20 diesel generators with diesel fuel to run power when the Russians knock the power out, which they've been doing. They did it just again the other day, actually, and they had to use the diesel fuels. I have not seen anything about backup water. That's really interesting. Now, the only thing is, as I said, the nuclear plant is upriver from the dam. So you're still going to have water coming through. The question is, does the dam affect the water supply as far up as the nuclear plant? Because a dam, let's face it, you're going to have a dam, you're going to have a reservoir of water behind it. Is that the only area the water backs up? Or does it also back up and make a much bigger river near the nuclear plant, where if that river were to get smaller, because the reservoir is broken, if the river gets smaller, does that mean somehow the intake doesn't quite work? Yeah, okay, there you go. Keith Warlick is saying on TikTok, if the water level drops, the intakes might be too high. Exactly. That basically at the nuclear plant, you've got, let's say you got the intake 6 feet below water level, I don't know what, for it to take water into the plant. All of a sudden, the dam further down, the reservoir further down breaks, the water level now drops a bit, and now the nuclear plant can't get enough water. I don't know. Now, okay, W. Mall is saying it would be designed for that. You would think, now that's a good point too. Nuclear plants are designed so that you could have a 747 crash into them. I mean, I always thought that was, I believed it, but apparently it really is true. So these plants are not supposed to, break, so to speak. Well, you'd think with the water, they also would figure out what to do about the water supply. If the water supply were dealing with a reservoir, it's a dam can break. I mean, you could have an earthquake. You could have, hell, it's Ukraine. You could have the Russians attack, right? So you'd think, well, okay. Dawn is saying on TikTok, unless Russia designed it, that's a fair point, actually. That's a fair point. Yeah. Sky Smurfer saying U.S. nuclear plants are designed that way. Soviet and Russian plants are less quality. So the question becomes, who designed this? Was it the Russians? Was it Soviet design? Because you're not going to have nearly as much of a safety bill, or, they're going to try to save money on it. Yeah. And what about droughts? Stephen Chance is also mentioning droughts, but again, you would think that would somehow be baked into the plant itself, where they'd say, okay, if there's a drought, there's an alternative supply of water. I don't know. Zaporizhzhia, I can never pronounce your name, Zaporizhzhia, France had to shut down nuclear plants due to cooling this summer. Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. You can, I believe Horseman is saying, can you shut it down till later? I know you can shut it down, obviously. The question becomes, well, wait a minute, actually. Wait a minute. First of all, shutting down a nuclear plant, I believe it's a lot harder to start it up again. Second of all, doesn't shutting it down entail having the water, right? I mean, you would still need the water to cool the fuel rods, even if you shut it down. So I'm not sure that necessarily, yeah, I don't know. This is interesting, actually. We need to get like a nuclear expert out here. That'd be really interesting. Oh, the Swedish thing. Shoot, Bitter is mentioning the Swedish traffic control lights. I forgot I was going to mention this to you guys today. Wait, let me look here and see if there were any other comments on YouTube about this, because it is a really interesting, it's an interesting topic. They turned off the MT. Oh, MT is always good. MT history. They turned off the reactors for safety under fire. Otherwise, the plant would normally use reactors to cool rods. Okay, MT would use water to cool rods. Oh, they would use the reactor to cool the rods? They turned off the reactors for safety under fire. Otherwise, the plant would not. I'm not sure I understand that sentence, MT. I'm not sure. Sorry, let me look here really quick, folks, and then we'll get rolling again. All right. I mean, we don't. Well, we can do more of this. Zaporizhzhia is shut down, but it still needs cooling for the nuclear rods. Okay, that's what I was wondering. So it already is shut down. And that's what I was going to say. Once it's shut down, you still need water to keep the rods cool because they're radioactive rods. It's not like, they're not cooling anytime soon, So that doesn't solve the problem. MT is saying again, they used the power from the nuclear reactors to run the pumps normally, but the reactors were being taken offline. Right. So now you would need water to deal with the excess energy coming off of the fuel rods, I'm assuming. Okay. Yeah, and Goldclaw was the one who said it was shut down. Okay. Now, actually, let me tell you real quick. I was going to tell you one last little. Well, I've got a lot of. Let me see. Because we might as well jump into the questions. I would want to look and see if there was any. The last bit of news I'll give you, because I thought it was just so obnoxious. The Russians are threatening the United Nations that if the UN investigates whether Russia and Iran are violating sanctions on Iran by using the drones from Iran. Okay, I'm going to make this normal English. Forget my notes. The UN, as part of the nuclear sanctions on Iran, the nuclear deal, the UN passes a resolution dealing with, among other things, production of weapons by Iran and buying weapons from Iran, so that if these drones in Ukraine are Iranian, and we all know they are, it would be a violation by Iran making the drones, and it would be a violation of Russia buying the drones, a violation of a United Nations resolution. Okay? Well, the UN, therefore, we've already got evidence, the UN was going to investigate and send investigators to Ukraine to check out the drones and see, basically investigators who know these things, and check them out and see, are they in fact Iranian drones? The Russians are now threatening the UN that maybe Russia isn't going to work with the UN ever again in the future if the UN sends investigators to check out the drones. I mean, listen, Russia will have to reassess its collaboration with the United Nations if they're sent to check out the drones. What Russia's saying is, look, we cheated. Iran cheated. If you investigate the fact that we cheated, then we're not going to work with you anymore. Well, you already weren't working with them, Russia, if you cheated, right? Now, what Russia's doing there is Russia's actually threatening the grain deal. This was a deal a few months ago. Russia had cut off all grain exports from Ukraine. Ukraine and Russia, both big exporters of grain, okay? Ukraine was exporting it down here. it would come through here and then go into the Mediterranean. So pass through Turkey and then by Greece into the Mediterranean down here. The Russians in this area were basically just telling the Ukrainian ship, we're going to blow you up. We're not going to let you pass. So all the Ukrainian grain exports got shut down. The UN brokers a deal with Turkey, Russia, Ukraine, United Nations to let the Ukrainians export their grain again. The reason, this is good for Ukraine because it's money, but it's really good for Africa and the Middle East because these are regions and countries that would have starved to death if the grain was not started up again. Russia was basically blackmailing, well, not even blackmailing the regions. Russia was blackmailing Europe and the West by saying, we're just going to kill lots of Africans and lots of folks in the Middle East if you don't, I don't even know what, we're just going to do it, right? And finally, so that's what I think Russia's doing here. Russia is saying, maybe we're just going to starve the Africans and starve the Middle Easterners if you decide to investigate the fact that we broke the rules. They're real. They're a piece of work. They're a real piece of work. Sorry. Laws is saying, what is Laws saying? No question, but wouldn't it be funny if Zelensky annexed the USA, UK, Norway, Poland, France, Spain, Germany, and then announced martial law? I guess. Why not? UN probably will cave to Russia, Three Grave is saying. I think that's probably very true. I did see this. Yeah, there was a lot of Otanbot was saying there's been news from Norway. They've arrested actually several people, Russians and some others who have been basically flying drones, and I think over sensitive areas, and looks pretty clear that they were spying for Russia. But the thing is, honestly, it's brilliant of Putin. I've told you guys before, if I were Putin, Putin's losing. He's losing this war. And if I were Putin, I would do whatever I could to freak out every single one of you that there's going to be a nuclear war and that, that Putin's getting ready to attack. Who knows? Attacking NATO, attacking the West, using nukes. But there's going to be a war because he needs to freak all of you out into convincing your governments not to support Ukraine, right? What he's doing there is really smart. He's sending spies to Norway to use drones to get a good sense of what are the best target, to get all the newest intelligence for targeting in case he wants to attack Norway. Now, that's not a dumb idea because I think the chance of war is slim with Russia, but you've got to do war planning anyway, right? So that's smart. But if you're trying to freak out the Europeans and you're trying to freak out NATO, you want to do some really obvious war planning. You want them to see that you're planning war. That's what you want to do. So it's actually really kind of smart what he did. And knowing Putin, he sacrificed some of his people, but he now has the Norwegians and NATO thinking, oh my God, was Putin preparing for war? It's kind of smart, And at the same time, he's got to prepare for war. Even if a war is unlikely, you got to prepare. That's a given, right? Anyway, we're now in the question and answer period. Let me jump into the Syndicate. I don't have the bot. I did not turn anything on or off. I just don't have it running in the background because my internet's been weird. I didn't want to play with it. So I don't have it running on my end, or whatchamacallit, whatever it's called, Streamlabs, but I never turned off any bots. No. Hang on a second here. Sorry. Syndicate, my wonderful friend and tech guy. Oop. I'm in my TikTok, so it's making noise, of course. Oh, Daniel. Okay. Sorry. Daniel jumped in first. Did you ever hear about the idea of a League of Democracies? Apparently John McCain was a supporter, a better alternative to the UN. I don't know. No. What is it actually? I don't know what that is. Now, okay. I could almost guess what it is, though. The idea is you don't have to deal with a bunch of UN dictatorships, that you basically can, if it's a League of Democracies and like-minded folks, you could get, it's like the G20, but with only the good guys, or the G7. But you get honestly, to some degree, it's kind of like what we've got going on with Ukraine right now, right? It's Europe, it's, and you include Ukraine in that. It's Asia, and it's the good guys in Asia. You could have good governments in Latin America. You could have the good governments in other words, you get sort of the good guys from each region, but they form a larger group that could be a NATO of sorts. I mean, you may not have it be a NATO where it's mutual defense, but it could at least be something like the United Nations, but a United Nations of people who get along and can actually get stuff done without everybody vetoing it. That's interesting. I did not know that. That's very interesting. Didn't know, Daniel. Thank you. All right, let me pull up TikTok Q&A. Any news about Melitopol? No. What was the news about Melitopol? I mean, Melitopol down here, okay, occupied by the Russians, but I'm not sure what news you were thinking we were asking about. Sorry. I don't even know about that. When the war is over, how long do we keep sanctions on Russia in place? Well, that's going to be one of the really not difficult, but complicated discussions. The sanctions are a very good bargaining chip we've got. Now, it is true that it's not clear that, well, actually, I should say this. We didn't even think. Biden said from the beginning he didn't think the sanctions were going to stop Russia from invading. But Russia's paying a big price, and Russia does not want those sanctions to be on forever. I mean, they're horrific sanctions. I mean, they're great sanctions, but meaning they're horrifically painful economically sanctions. Part of the bargaining chip we've got for the end of the war, thank you, Nonna, or I should say, grazie, Nonna. Part of the leverage we've got is the sanctions in the West. And I should say it's part of the leverage that Ukraine has are the Western sanctions. So the war can end whatever that means. But I guess, let me put it this way. How the war ends, the sanctions will be part of ending the war. Because the war only stops when Ukraine and Russia both say, okay, we stop fighting, right? If one side keeps bombing, the other side's going to keep bombing back. So the war's not over. So part of that decision or that discussion by Russia and Ukraine as to whether they stop bombing each other is going to be, what do we do about the sanctions? What do we do about war crimes, right? What do we do about, what's the word I'm looking for? Payments, you know what I'm saying? Reparations, there we go, war reparations, where Russia has to pay Ukraine for the damage it's caused. So what happens to the frozen, the money that's been frozen? We've got 300 billion with a B in Russian assets that are frozen in banks. Do we just make those available to Russia again? Or do we sit on it and make it part of the negotiation of Russia having to somehow, maybe it's Russia has to give back any land that it still is holding and we lift the sanctions? I don't know. But I mean, I don't know what the solution is going to be, but our sanctions are going to be part of that discussion. Danielle, the UN Security Council does not allow continuance. Not sure what you mean by continuance, but the UN Security Council's a disaster because all you need is one country vetoing and then things stop. What if the UN General GS points to the fact that the Soviet Union is greater? Oh, I see. What if the UN, I'm assuming, maybe you mean General Assembly? I don't know what GS is. Points to the fact that the Soviet Union is more than just Russia. There was no application to the Security Council, right? Or is it a moot point? Okay, that's a whole other discussion. You know what's funny? Marion, my friend Marion, who comes on occasionally, but she works for a living, I guess like all of you. But that was a discussion Marion and I had and started looking at, was what the whole issue was with regards to international law and Russia getting the Soviet Union's, General Secretary, thank you. The whole issue of Russia inherited the Soviet Union's UN seat and Security Council seat. But it's crazy because the Soviet Union was, I keep saying 15, I think it was 15 different states or whatever you want to call it. Well, it was actually countries. I mean, Russia, basically the Soviet Union, and the Russians kind of pulled the strings, were oppressing 14 countries on behalf of one, Russia. Thank you for that. The MAGA trolls have arrived. That's okay. We're going to wait till the end, and then we're going to have a little discussion. But and by the way, let me just tell folks, sometimes it seems that the MAGA trolls get very upset and they report my lives. So if the live drops off, I just start it up again because TikTok approves my appeal literally within 2 seconds. So if the live drops off, come right back. Okay, TikTok, just always remember, and for the mods as well to tell people, but always remember that. In any case, so Russia inherits the Soviet Union's UN seat, even though there's 13 other countries, there are 14 other countries that have a right to claim the seat. Ukraine has the right, Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, right? I mean, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, all of these countries have the right to say, what about us? We were part of the Soviet Union too. But somehow Russia got it. And Russia got it because the West caved, I think. And then the UN caved because the West caved. It's ridiculous. And frankly, what the Russians would do, the Russians, if the shoe were on the other foot and Ukraine were Russia and Ukraine were the big bad power invading poor Russia, Russia would turn around and say, we're taking your UN seat. There ought to be a serious movement to take away Russia's UN seat and then see how Russia feels about it. And watch the Russians cut it. And just, even if it doesn't work, make the Russians work. Oh, there's Marion. Speak of the devil. Thank you, Marion. I swear to God, I think you and I were on the phone discussing this and we were researching it. But we were looking into it, but it's an interesting, there was some interesting, she found an interesting essay about it. It's an interesting discussion. And frankly, the world caved to Russia and it was unfair. It was totally unfair. If anything, what actually should have happened was they should have rotated, and it should have been each former Soviet state should have, each member of the CIS or whatever the hell it was immediately afterwards, each one should be able to take the seat on the UN Security Council for a month, and they should just rotate in. I mean, that would be the way to do it. It's absolutely outrageous. Absolutely outrageous. Motec, I'm not sure if you're talking to me or you guys talking to, are you guys talking to, you're talking to other people, I think, right? You're not talking to me. Okay. Germany on your list. I don't think you're talking to me. I don't think. I'm looking at this going, my list? Anyway. All right. What else we got? Let me go and pull up another question on TikTok here. One moment here. Why wouldn't Ukraine attack the interior of Russia to get even for the brutality? Okay, a couple things. One, war crimes, right? I mean, you kind of want to be careful of war crimes. Oh, Germany. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, Motec's got a point. I didn't mention. So you know what? We got so sort of off on tangents with the questions. I didn't get to sort of one of the last issues I was going to mention. Because we spend a good deal of time here on the Evacuations report criticizing Germany for not being the best ally to Ukraine. But the German chancellor announced that Germany is going to be training 5,000 Ukrainian soldiers by the spring. The training will take place as part of the military assistance mission in support of Ukraine, which aims to prepare about 15,000 Ukrainian soldiers, according to the Associated Press. So 5,000 will be trained by the spring, which is good. I mean, so good for Germany. That was the Germany question. That was it. Yes. All right, let me look. Sorry, my allergy nose again. And I took an allergy pill before, but it didn't help. So my nose is itching like it always does. This was the question. Why wouldn't Ukraine attack the interior of Russia to get even for the brutality? It's a good question. Now, thank you, Jerry. Appreciate that. And just a reminder, sorry, I always forget to reset. In radio, we call this resetting because people keep coming fresh. Now, maybe a little less over with you guys, but you guys on TikTok, I'm sure we have sort of new people come in and go out. This is the Evacuations report. I am John Evacuations. Every night, Monday to Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern, I do a summary of the news of the last 24 hours from Ukraine. And then the last half of the show, which is what we're doing right now, I take questions and we talk about the issues of the day. And a lot of you are actually experts on this stuff too, which is nice because people will kind of weigh in and give their expertise on the military or on dam building or rivers or whatever else. And as always, if you guys can support me, I really appreciate it with the questions on TikTok, on YouTube, with the gifts on TikTok. All of it's very helpful and helps me keep my work going. So thank you very much. just like that little green guy on TikTok. Thank you, great CFI. So why doesn't Ukraine attack Russia? The thing is, there's a couple issues here. One, attacking civilian targets is a war crime. The Russians do it all the time. The Russians do it on purpose. It is part of Russian policy to attack civilians. A lot of our countries have attacked civilians and gotten into trouble for it, rightfully so, including my own country. But it has not, in the last, 50 years at least, been part of U.S. policy to attack civilians. When it happens, we get into trouble for it. And the thing is, we get into trouble for it here at home. Like, the politics here at home causes a lot of problems when you attack civilians. Abu Ghraib wasn't even attacking civilians, but the nastiness that happened at Abu Ghraib, that was a scandal here in the States when that happened. I mean, a lot of us were really pissed. In any case, the Russians, it's quite the opposite. The Russians, thank you, Daniel, the Russians use attacks on civilians as part of their military strategy. So if the Ukrainians were to do the same thing, thank you, Darrell, if the Ukrainians were to do the same thing, it would get them into trouble with the West because they would be committing war crimes, and then the U.S. would not be happy, NATO would not be happy, Western European governments would not be happy, and it would start to, thank you, Sederman, for that, it would start to put pressure, more pressure on our governments not to support Ukraine, because opposition politicians at home would say, well, you're supporting war criminals, and they'd be right if Ukraine were doing that, right? That's the first problem. Second problem is the U.S. has made clear that, Daniel, if your question didn't show up, feel free to post it on TikTok, on YouTube. Just post your question normally, and I'll look for it. No problem. That happens sometimes. The question doesn't show up. Another possibility is, and we know this is true, the U.S. has told Ukraine, and I suspect Western governments as well, other NATO governments have told Ukraine, do not use our weapons to attack Russia, or we're not going to let you use our weapons. There is concern. I think it's overblown, but there's concern from the Western governments, U.S. in particular, but I'm sure the other ones aren't happy either, that it's going to antagonize Putin, and God only knows what Putin will do if NATO weapons, or not NATO weapons, but weapons from NATO countries are used to attack Russia. So the Ukrainians aren't doing it because they agreed with us not to do it. Okay. But as a category of getting our weapons, but also I think even with their weapons, let's face it. I mean, the Ukrainians in the East, the Ukrainians could easily just attack Russian territory, because Russia and Ukraine, I mean, this is all Russia here. Okay. All of this is Russia. Well, the Ukrainians can just go up to their own border and bomb Russia, right? Using their own artillery. They don't even have to use the HIMARS, which we gave them. Their own artillery could bomb into Russia and hit villages and towns. They're not doing it in part because I think they know it would antagonize us, and it's not clear what benefit it gets them. That's the final point I'll make, and then there's another Daniel had another question here. It's not clear what benefit it gets them. I think the Ukrainians figured, honestly, the Ukrainians are winning. I mean, Russia initially got a lot of land, okay? Russia got 20% of Ukrainian territory in the first, couple months. The Ukrainians have now been pushing back and winning back their land. It's going slowly. Thank you for that on TikTok, the October thingy. It's going slowly, but it's going. And I think that yep, I see Daniels. Don't worry, guys. That the Ukrainians don't need to get distracted and start going after Russia because they're winning. And their strategy is to keep taking back the territory in Ukraine and getting their towns back. They've got to watch the amount of weapons they've got, because, they never have enough artillery, right? They've got to watch all of basically, they don't want to waste their weapons. So I think that's the other reason, even though I think for you and me, we kind of look and go, wouldn't it be nice if they could just take out the Russians' power, and show the Russians? I don't disagree, but nonetheless, I think they're intentionally trying to focus on what works. And, good for them. I mean, because it is. They're even like the Russians taking out all the power of the Ukrainians. Yeah, Russia's causing a big problem for Ukrainian civilians. They're not causing a big problem for the Ukrainian army. The Ukrainian army is still trudging ahead, and they're going to get the town of Kherson pretty soon. So, Daniel saying, what was the point? Good question. What was the point of the Budapest memorandum on security assurances if since 2014 to now we haven't seen security assurances? Thank you for that on TikTok. Was it not worth the ink and paper it was printed on? Well, I mean, so the deal is, let me get a little water here. The deal is, oh, this is the cool thing. Sorry, the cool whale. Oh, love the whale. Thank you for that. Thank you so much for that. Wait, I've got to see who did the whale here. Oh, that was, oh, Annie. Thank you, Annie. That was insane. That whale thing. Sorry, somebody did a very cool gift on TikTok, and it's this wild whale swimming through like a black hole. It's the coolest thing. That's the whale. That we love the whale. The whales, everyone, the best part is that everyone on TikTok just kind of stops and goes, oh my God, what was that? It's always fun to see the reaction to that. Thank you for that, Annie. That was very sweet of you. And the sound too. It's totally cool. Okay. So we were talking about the Budapest Memorandum. The Budapest Memorandum was an agreement that US, Russia, United Kingdom, America, and then later on, I think France and others joined on, signed as part of a deal to guarantee Ukraine's security in exchange. Thank you, Zakeli, for that. In exchange for Ukraine giving up its nuclear weapons. Ukraine. Whenever I talk about Ukraine's nuclear weapons, I say Ukraine. Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union. When the Soviet Union dissolved, Ukraine had a portion of Soviet weapons. Thank you, Real, for that. The real, or is it Real Tom or Real Mel Tom Ash? I can never get your name right. The Ukraine had a number of the Soviet weapons on its territory. Soviet Union dissolves. Ukraine got the weapons. I think it was 5,000 nuclear weapons, something like that. It was a lot. It was several thousand. The world did not want Ukraine. Russia really didn't want Ukraine to have the weapons, but the world didn't either. We didn't want the dissolution of the Soviet Union to suddenly mean there were 15 new or 14 new nuclear states or however many it was. So we got together, Great Britain and America made assurances, and we said, okay, Ukraine, if you give up these weapons, we are going to, basically guarantee your security. And we all know what that really means is we're going to protect you from Russia because Russia's the only people you're really, they're the only ones you're worried about. And we're going to protect you from Russia. Well, Russia invades in 2014. They steal Crimea, the peninsula in the south, and the world doesn't really do too much. We put some, I forgot what we did. Maybe we did some sanctions. We didn't do a hell of a lot. Now, Ukraine couldn't do a hell of a lot either because they didn't have the military for it back then. But we didn't do a hell of a lot. Britain didn't do a hell of a lot. You now go all the way to this invasion. We have done a heck of a lot in terms of supporting Ukraine not monetarily with we don't just give Ukraine money, but I mean with weapons, but also support for the government. The Ukrainian government needed money to keep paying civil servants because they had to keep the government functioning, for example. We provided some money for that, for example, right? But a lot of weapons. The issue, sorry, I'm like losing. I keep looking at your guys' questions, and it makes me lose my train of thought because I look at the question and I go, right. So the issue is we didn't necessarily step in and defend Ukraine. We didn't step in and say when we knew Russia was going to attack. Okay, we knew Russia was going to attack. Some of the countries said we don't believe it. Even the Ukrainians said we aren't sure. Biden was convinced Russia was going to attack, and my suspicion is the Brits probably knew it too. We didn't step in and say, Putin, if you attack, we're going to invoke the Budapest Memorandum and we're going to war too. We didn't do it. Why did we sign the agreement if we weren't willing to do it? Now, I don't want to go to war with Russia, but we signed a freaking agreement that said we would that we would guarantee Ukraine's territorial integrity. Well, got news for you. The territorial integrity hasn't been guaranteed since 2014 when Russia stole this. And right now, Russia stole a lot of this. 20% of Ukraine's territory, maybe 18% right now, is in the hand of the Russians. So I agree with Daniel on this. I think we screwed Ukraine on this. We really did. And we are doing a lot of support now, which is great. But, even what we're doing right now, we're still playing the game of, if we give fighter jets, that'll piss off Putin. If we give long-range rockets, we can only give short-range rockets because long-range rockets will piss off Putin. We can't let Ukraine attack anything in Russia because that'll piss off Putin. We're still playing this weird game of you signed an agreement, Putin, that said you weren't going to invade, and you invaded twice. And we signed an agreement that said we're going to come to the defense of that kind, and we're going to stop it from happening. We didn't stop it from happening. We didn't stop it from happening twice. So, all right. Well, we guarantee Taiwan safety. That's a whole other discussion. Yeah. All right, guys. So you know what? Let's call it quits. We can skip. I only bring up Trump when there's a legitimate Trump discussion. I'm not going to do it just to piss off the trolls, even though the trolls are being rude. We talk Trump and then they report my lives to get them shut down. And then we start it up again. What do you do? But there's nothing to talk about. Yeah. I'll do a recap. No, when Trump is a legitimate topic of discussion, we're going to talk Trump. And actually the thing is, the Russians are learning this too. Because the MAGA trolls have been so rude about doing this, I'm now going to make sure to cover Trump every time I can. I will be reporting on Donald Trump because the MAGA trolls decided they wanted to be rude. So when it is newsworthy, I will report on him. So quick news summary. The battle for Kherson is it's looming. The Russians seem to be making noise that they're planning to evacuate, which is great, northern Kherson and the actual town of Kherson. It's a strategically important town, so that's great. The Russians claim they've already evacuated 15,000 civilians, including their own collaborators and government employees from north and west of the Dnipro River. There's a lot of growing concern about a potential Russian attack on a dam along that river right there in southern Ukraine, that the Russians may attack a dam in the area in order to stop the Ukrainians from chasing the Russians in retreat. It is expected the Russians are going to have to retreat soon in the town of Kherson, and that as they're retreating, they may blow up the dam in order to flood the way and stop the Ukrainians from following them. All right. Russia may be leaving the area of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant. There's some reports from locals. Others discount it and say it's hard to believe the Russians would give up sort of that bargaining chip because, as we know, the Russians have been playing sort of a nuclear, what's the word I'm looking for? Basically nuclear terrorism. They've been threatening the plant and it looks like they've been trying to blow it up. U.S. intelligence says that there's a window of opportunity for the next 6 weeks before winter sets in for the Ukrainians to make gains in eastern Ukraine and to possibly take the town of Kherson before everything gets muddy and cloud cover forces both the Ukrainians and the Russians to sort of dig in for the winter. Thank you for that, Kiwi. President Zelensky, this was interesting. Yeah, President Zelensky said to a Canadian news outlet, that Ukraine didn't order the Crimean bridge attack, the Kerch bridge attack a few weeks ago. We definitely did not order that as far as I know, he said, which to me left a little bit of weird wiggle room. Russia is threatening the United Nations that if they investigate Russia having bought, thank you for that, Louis. If they investigate Russia having bought the Iranian drones, which is a violation of the nuclear deal on the part of Iran and a violation of the nuclear deal on the part of Russia buying the drones, that Russia then will have to reevaluate whether it works with the UN in the future. You can hear them stamping their high heels as they say that. Ukrainians have opened, okay, 2 other little bits I didn't have, and I was going to report, but I didn't tell you guys. Ukrainians have opened almost 10,000 businesses in Poland since February 24th. Thank you for that, Purnell. According to Business Inside Poland, the European Union reportedly approved sanctions against Iran for selling the drones to Russia, and Germany is going to be training 5,000 Ukrainian soldiers by the spring. Woo-woo! All right, guys, thank you for joining me. This has been the Aravosis Report every night at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, U.S., at 6 p.m. New York City time. What would that be? 3 p.m. Pacific? Yeah? Tired. 4 p.m. Pacific, not 3 p.m. No, 4. Wait, 3 p.m. Pacific, right? God, I'm already forgetting. I'm so tired. I'm forgetting my time zones. Yeah, 3, 4, 5, 6. 3 p.m. Pacific. Poland, 1 a.m. There you go, 1 a.m. Polish time. Are you actually in Poland right now? You guys make me feel bad when you're awake listening to this at 1 a.m. in Poland. Thank you guys. But I will be back tomorrow as well. I know UK, you are in Poland right now. Well, welcome. Thank you for everything you guys have been doing. I will be back tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern time again. We will do this again Friday night and then off again until Monday. Thank you for joining. Thank you for the gifts. Thank you for the support. You guys are amazing. I'll go over to the Discord real quick. We'll go to the Discord and hang out for a little bit. I do have a Discord. It's discord.aravosis.com. I also have a Patreon, which you can use just to support me if you want, but you can also use it to get more privileges at the Discord. The Discord is free otherwise, regardless. But you can find out all of that on my link, aravosis.com. So go to aravosis, my last name.com, and you can find links for all of this stuff, including the Discord, including a shop I've got of Ukrainian, really cool t-shirts and all sorts of stuff. All right, guys, let's call it quits. Thank you, moderators. As always, you're amazing. I appreciate it. I realize it's not fun doing what you do. Although I will say, personally, I enjoy blocking the trolls, I will admit. Sometimes I even jump in and block them myself because it's like a little bit of just, it's not schadenfreude. I don't know what it would be called. Just like a little bit of blocking the trolls goodness. So, but I do appreciate you guys doing this too. All right, guys, let's go over to the Discord and hang for a slight bit. All right. Good night, all. Thank you. Yep. Sign up there.